And we're live. Hello, hello, hello. Happy Monday. Happy day before the 20th anniversary of 228 2003.
Ooh.
We are here live on the Helping Friendly podcast to take a slight diversion from what we have been doing for the last 6-7 weeks. Previously scheduled program of HFPod 40 for 40, celebrating 40 years of Fish. We are diverting from that this week. Why are we diverting from that? Because Fish just played 4 actual concerts for what I think were paying customers in Cancun, Mexico. Though I don't know if they were ChatGPT creations of what a Fish fan might look like.
Photos that looked startlingly like humans and not sort of like humans. So
that one that RJ posted yesterday leaves some debate on whether they were real or not.
This is a good question. I think I know people who were in Mexico this year. I was in Denver, Colorado, experiencing beautiful winter weather, hanging out with the family, watching Fish, making food, chilling out. The way I like to consume Fish, both edible as well as musical. So we are here today, myself, Mr. Ryan Storm, the host of Always Almost There, the host of We Move Through Stormy Weather, an excellent podcaster, thinker, writer in his own right. We've also got Jonathan Hart, amazing podcaster, host of the Broke Down podcast. I am Brian Brinkman. As I noted, I also run a little podcast called Beyond the Pond, and we come together to talk about Fish. And we are here today to talk about Mexico 2023. We're going to run through the big themes that we took away from this 4-show run. Going to talk a little bit about where we think that Fish is at the onset of 2023, their 30th year. No, their 40th year.
I took the 40th year. I took the 40 off the screen and you couldn't remember.
I couldn't see anymore. I couldn't see it. So we're going to talk about this run, get into the weeds in terms of what we thought about what happened musically, what our takeaways are. Before we do that, there's 2 bits of business. One, this was just announced, but I'm reading it verbatim. Sunday, March 12th.
Oh, yeah.
Goose is playing. They're going to be in the middle of their cap run at that point.
That's night 5.
That's the final night of the run. RJ and Tom are going to be at Garcia's at the cap. They're going to host Rick, Peter, and Jeff for a conversation. They say little, but I think it's going to be a big conversation about some of Goose's songs, as well as Goose is going to play live, at least in that Arevalo trio. It should be a fantastic afternoon. Tickets are on sale now. The show is
they're on sale tomorrow.
1 p.m. Thank you. On sale tomorrow, 1:30 p.m. start time. Should be an awesome show. Should be a great way if you are hanging out, watching those Goose Cap shows. You will be there.
I believe Megan will be as well.
I believe Megan will be there. I'd be there if I was anywhere close to the East Coast.
Yes.
Very, very, very excited.
Also, it's going to be fun because daylight savings is the prior night. So we lose an hour going into the final night of a 5-night run. So that's going to be fun.
Is that good?
It's going to be great.
No, it's not good.
Time's an illusion.
I'm going to be very tired.
You're going to be very tired, but I think the music is going to be very good.
I agree.
We have one more bit of business to get to, but before we get to that, we have a question from the audience here. Jonathan, I think you wanted to field this. Megan for the recap. Didn't she make the trek? Megan, where's Megan?
Megan and RJ both went, but they are busy recuperating or traveling while recuperating or vice versa. And we didn't want to make you wait. So we're here. They'll be back. They'll fill us in if they have specific details, highlights, etc. Follow their social media for interesting, Megan's at least, RJ's, his pictures with his wife. It's fine. But yeah, check them out. They'll be back and we'll ask them. Also, probably might get to it on the bonus episode this week. I think we have a bonus episode scheduled with them after they're both back.
How do I listen to a bonus episode?
Well, you should subscribe to Osiris Premium, which is probably the next thing that Brian wanted to tell everybody about. And that's the thing
tracks.
you should do. You get bonus episodes from us, you get ad-free episodes, and I don't know, probably a bunch of other stuff.
Wow.
This is very true. Becoming a member of Osiris Premium, it allows you to support what we do as well as get access to really fun content. That isn't actually the other piece of business I had, but thank you, Jonathan, for taking that because that is important context. Before we jump into this, I just want to give both of you a platform really quickly. Tell me what you've got coming out over on your own individual feeds around right now. Ryan, you go first.
Well, sorry, I was repeat the question really quick.
You want to field that other one? We'll get to it. Go ahead, Ryan.
Jonathan, how about you? What do you got going on? Over on your own personal feed?
I don't know. I'm making Broke Down Pod every now and then. That's what I've got going on. How about that? I just put out an episode a week ago with Rootless, great guitar player in Brooklyn area, and he makes pretty great weird music. It's an auto weird, some it's very coherent and interesting and beautiful, and you should check that out. I've got upcoming episodes that are upcoming. But I don't typically announce who's going to be on them because I never know until I know, and then you will know. So subscribe to the Broke Down Podcast and find out pretty much right after I do.
That sounds similar to how I do episodes if we move through stormy weather. I'm like a maximum of a week in advance usually.
Well, sometimes I record them weeks in advance, but they come out when they come out. But I don't tell anybody when they're coming out because that way I won't break a promise.
That's fair. Well, in Storm Sound land, we had a very exciting episode with this guy over here just come out this morning.
Which guy? This guy? Oh, shit, this guy.
The guy in the hat.
The guy in the hat.
Brian, and also a good friend of ours from the internet fish community, Justin Bruce. We joined forces to do a deep dive into the best jams of 2003 in honor of the 20th anniversary. That is out now wherever you get your podcasts. Storm Sound, you can check that out. It is almost 3 hours long. It is about as long as the Longest Always Almost There episode, which is the Goose side of things over at Storm Sound. We are about to launch into Goose Spring Tour, which means we will be back. We'll be back with our day after show recaps every single day after every single Goose show at 3:00 p.m. Eastern, live on this YouTube channel that you're watching this on right now, actually.
This one right here.
You can tune in. Also, Storm Sound. That's exciting. And there are other very exciting announcements in Storm Sound land happening in the next couple of weeks. So keep your eye out for that.
Everyone definitely vote in the Jam of the Year 2022 bracket, even though the Glens Falls Madhuvan was left off, which is completely inexcusable.
Brian,
but that's neither here nor there because we are talking about Fish Mexico 2023. I will just say we put out an episode of Beyond the Pond earlier this month talking about the song Simple in various iterations and then talking about the CTI jazz label. Really, really cool stuff. We've got another episode cooking about a little indie rock band who is coming back after 10 years called The Walkmen, one of my favorite bands of all time. Going to do a big deep dive into them. But all of that is happening elsewhere on Osiris Media. Please check out everything that Storm Sound is doing over at We Move Through Stormy Weather, Always Almost There, the Broke Down Pod, as well as Beyond the Pond, and so much more. There's so much that we bring you guys here at Osiris Media. All right. Mexico 2023. The last time we saw Fish, they played two incredibly strong shows at Madison Square Garden on the 29th and 30th, two of my favorite shows of 2022, and then a New Year's Eve show that had one of my favorite gags the band has ever done. The gags every year, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what are they going to do. I don't put a ton of stock into the gags. Sometimes they're totally stupid and that's totally okay. Other times they're really heartfelt and meaningful. This one I would put in the heartfelt and meaningful category. They did a full breakdown of Fish over 40 years, felt like a big review of who the band was, and it ushered us into the 40th year of Fish history, which begins with this Mexico 2023 run. This is their 6th run, I believe, in Mexico. They did 16, 17, 19, 20, 22, and 23. 4 nights. We get back to the single set opening set, 2 full shows. The last night is a full show, but it's kind of an afternoon, evening, has a soiree kind of feel to it.
Ooh, good word.
All right, word. I can podcast. Night 1 began about 30 minutes after ticket time. We got Hood, Moma Dance, Back on the Train into very, very clean segue into My Friend, Sand, Sample, Yamar, Roger, Cars, Trucks, Buses, Blaze On into Twist, into Bounce Around the Room, Free, and an encore of 46 Days. Jonathan. Hi. Tell me 2 things. First and foremost, what were your expectations going into this run coming off of the New Year's run? And what was your big takeaway from night 1 in Mexico?
I'm so glad you mentioned the New Year's run earlier and now, because I just want to take issue with the fact that you said they played a couple great shows and then they played New Year's, because that hurts, man, because I only went to New Year's and I feel like that hurt. Anyways, moving on. I think that the band was on a fair footing, and I think they remained there. This first show, I almost said set and show in the same word, which is
it was a shet
here. It was a shet, but not a shit.
It was pretty shetty.
And not a shit show. I think it's a solid shet. I gotta stop using that.
I like it.
I think it's a pretty solid show. It's not extraordinarily out of this world, but it's a really fun listen. And that's what I did. I didn't stream it the night of. I listened to it on Friday and had it just like enjoyed every bit of it. Little jams in here, though. There's some jams to talk about.
Fish has played a lot of shets over the last couple of years.
They're getting better at it.
Yeah,
they're getting. We talked about this
like,
a lot over the summer.
I think they've only played like 3, but it feels like a lot because.
No, they've done this one. They did Mexico last year. They did Dick's Night 2.
Oh,
Pine
yes,
Knob.
Dick's.
Yeah, they keep happening.
There was Fenway 2019. They seem to be getting much better at the flow of it. It's really strange how you would think as like a performing musician, a 2-set show versus a 1-set show. Well, it's a concert, but like there's such a distinct flow to the way that Fish's 2-set shows tend to unfold that when they cram that into 1 set, it's like, where does the transition happen? Or where does deep jamming going? And it felt like when they were first playing these, I don't want to say it was a struggle, but there were certain flow issues I found as a listener. I felt like Dick's Night 2 and this one kind of, hit the ground running almost immediately in a really strong way. Obviously, you get the first Harry Hood opener since December 2nd, 2003. Ryan, tell me what your thoughts were kind of going into this run and what you thought of the single Shet show. The Shet.
So this one, kind of just doing an A/B look, at least on paper, this one versus last year's Shet. Last year's had a 20+ minute tweezer less than an hour into the first set of the year. So that was a pretty big statement from the band. And also we kind of see how the evolution continues very much like it's a continuation of the sound and developments from the end of 2022. So I think Trey has definitely been playing some guitar over the last 6 weeks. He came out of the gate in this Hood very, very confident. His playing all weekend really, like he sounded very well rehearsed. He some of the composed sections maybe he hadn't been practicing as much, but he's clearly been playing guitar. And I really, really hope that this kind of vibe sticks through. Like when we see them again in April, I hope this is still the case. Because as we all know, Trey is very well rehearsed. The band sounds exponentially better. This was a solid set, some nice shorter jams. I tried not to have any big expectations going into it, but it flowed well. Blaze On, definite highlight.
Yes.
Very much.
I mean, my highlights are Back on the Train, Sand, and Blaze On it, but Blaze On above all. How about you, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just from going between New Year's and now, close listeners of this podcast and of where I am elsewhere, like I didn't love 2022, and I went into New Year's almost just kind of feeling like I'm going to watch these shows, but I didn't really go in with any sort of like emotional attachment to what happened. The 29th and 30th blew me away, and it really kind of reset my thought process going into this year. And so, going into this, like Mexico, it's got such a weird place in the mindset of a fan. Some people will say it doesn't count for stats purposes.
I'm just kidding when I say that, but I say it.
You are, but I mean, there's a sense of like, well, most of the fan base can't go from both a space and also a cost standpoint. So like, we're just going to webcast at home. That to me is not really a problem. I'm totally cool with webcasting a lot of fish shows and not attending them in person. But Mexico also, the band has sneakily been really on throughout most of Mexico's history, even though it kind of gets overlooked. There's a lot of really, really good shows. However, it doesn't really seem to predict where they're going to go throughout the year. It always feels a little bit more tied to the year prior, at least from my perspective, than the way that they're going to sound when they come out for a spring, summer, fall tour. So I kind of went into it. It's a long way of saying without many expectations. I was really happy with New Year's and that whole run. And I kind of went into this just thinking, let's see what you guys got right now. I think the biggest takeaway is Trey's performance overall was really aggressive. He was really commanding, as you were noting, Ryan. I really liked, and I'm curious, listeners out there, what their thoughts are on this. Vance Powell being on the LP mix,
Yes.
both for the webcast
That's a
and the
whole other
MP3s.
podcast. Like
It's
worlds different hearing the mix in Live Fish and on the stream this past weekend versus anything in the past year, 2 years, whatever. It's just much better.
It made it really enjoyable to hear them, even in moments that are not that original or unique. Like even when they weren't jamming, when they were just playing a straight ahead solo, you could hear everyone at a really nice
solo
layer.
or not. They're playing like core composition pieces, and
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
hear that Fish isn't just a thump. You can hear all of Fish's drums.
Mm-hmm.
And you can hear all Fish's drums, and you can hear these
there was
ideas
a really
that
nice
Mike has.
there was a really nice stereo
too.
panning to the drums that was happening. It was excellent. So thank you, Vance.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Vance.
And that impacted
he's
my
around to
overall
stay.
takeaway. I do too, or at least someone who is training directly on this is what I did, and you just do these things the same way that I did, but there's probably something in the ear that you just can't replicate. This made it really exciting for me, and you guys both mentioned the Blaze On. That was my big highlight of night one. That to me was an inventive jam. It was very patient. There was a lot of kind of creative leads from Trey that were in communication directly to what Mike was doing, which is again something I don't feel like we were hearing a lot. Trey would play lines in 2022 and you wouldn't necessarily hear where they originated from. And oftentimes Mike will play like a descending or ascending riff. Trey will catch on to that. And that's when the band knows, okay, let's jump onto this theme. Let's move forward. And I felt as though that jam spoke to a band that's in communication and has a really good feeling about where they're at going into the year, and almost out the gates played a jam that I think is going to hold up for the remainder of the year, unless they completely blow us away in terms of the overall jamming perspective. Like that is about as good as it gets for me, that Blaze On.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think out of any of the jams from night one, I think that one has the potential to still be in my top 64 at year's end. You know, I'm so deep into the bracket mindset now that I just think of jams in terms of whether they're going to still be on my list at the end of the year. And I think that one definitely has the potential to. It reminded me a lot of the 12-30-19 Blaze On, just this kind of nice, like 16, 17 minute-ish jam, gets into a nice major key space. And I feel like this kind of Blaze On gets overlooked. Like that Blaze On from 12-30-19 got overlooked almost immediately.
Well, there's something else.
Something else happened at that show, obviously. Too. But you shouldn't forget about the other smaller jams.
Humans have very small memories.
Every jam matters.
When
Every
there's a
jam matters.
big shiny tweezer in the second set, it's hard to.
Yeah,
This is true.
exactly.
At some point, there are going to be no more fish jams, and at that point, every jam will matter.
Whoa.
And I think that it's important.
It's true.
Yeah, you know, it's
Way
just
to put a damper on the fun.
It
here.
happened before. Some of us are old enough to remember.
Hey, I was alive when that happened.
You were alive during COVID. That's right. Glenn Russell has.
That's
a
not what
great
he was talking
question.
about.
I know. I'm aware. Glenn Russell has a great question here. Is the new sound mix apparent just for webcasts, or changed the PH download mix too? From my ears, it sounds as though it affects the download mix as well. And Vance's title is Live Fish Audio Engineer. I believe that's how he was credited on the webcast, which would lead you to think he's there for the webcast as well as what they're downloading and presenting to listeners.
He did also say on Twitter that he is doing the mixing for the Live Fish as well.
Yeah. The
Thank you.
difference being that the compression when you stream Live Fish from your app is a little more intense than when you're watching the HD webcast on your home stereo.
That's true.
So
That's
for all
true.
you audiophiles out there,
Good luck.
I do want to transition us to night 2, but I
Do
do
it.
just want to bring up this question. I thought this was interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think unplanned shets are harder for Fish to nail? So Fish goes into Mexico knowing that there's a one set show to open up the run, but like Dick's, Pine Knob, they were planning to go on stage at a certain time, especially Dick's. That wasn't called until
Late.
I mean, it was
we talked about this
8:15.
after Dick's, and we talked about it there actually, which
We
is that,
did.
for Dick's, for example, they were like ready to go, and
Right.
they had this potential to kind of like lose their edge and energy coming out, but they delivered. I mean, Fish has built their entire career on 2 set shows and what it feels like to go out with that much time to play. And cutting it down unexpectedly is tough. Cutting it down, I think, by plan, by design, I think is getting easier for them.
Yeah, I think Dick's Night 2 showcased them, as we talked about then and talking about now. Whatever energy they had about to walk out on stage, they just like redirected towards Carini, You Enjoy Myself, Ghost, Reba. Like, we're just going to come out guns blazing in the first 30, 40 minutes of this show and see where we are at that point in time. And at that point, the energy was already so high that it just carried through the remainder of the show. Ryan, you have any thoughts on this?
I think you guys covered it very nicely there. Having
Let's
been in
jump on.
attendance for one, I feel like you have a better perspective.
I know that was one of the most fun Fish shows I've ever been to. And
You had a
most
good
of it,
time.
like the show itself was great. None of this is what I'm about to say is a knock on it, but like most of it was just the survival atmosphere and
Yeah.
the camaraderie in the venue. And then it was like, oh shit, and we're about to get a Fish show.
Yeah.
Um,
Also,
right.
Jonathan, thank you, and I guess both of you, it was a team effort, but thank you for the word "shet."
You're welcome.
we've created shit into the discourse.
It's gonna catch on. now.
All right, night 2, Friday, 2/24, 2023. Fish comes out. Set 1, Dinner and a Movie, which is a bust out since August 4th, 2017. 177 shows. You were
Lemon,
there.
I was there.
You were there. That
Great
was a
show.
great show.
Great sense.
Loving Cup, Wave of Hope, Stash, Heavy Things, 555, Into Axilla Part 2, Into Joy, Split Up in a Melt. Set 2, First Tube, Waves, Ruby Waves, Shade, Shock Dust Torture, Into Bathtub Gin, and the encore of Golgi Apparatus, unfortunately without a middle section jam, and Character Zero.
What a show!
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's dive into this. Like, what
What
were
a
the big
show.
takeaways from this?
Go, Ryan.
Like, I mean, they came out of the gate with this bust out, this like second song, Loving Cup. Like, okay. And then, like, we've talked about this a bunch. I know Brian and I especially, but there are 6 songs in this show over 15 minutes long. That's a lot. Like, that's an insane amount of improvisation in one
Yeah.
show. And the improvisation in pretty much all of these jams is really high quality. I'd say, like, Melt was amazing. Ruby Waves was amazing. Gin was amazing. And then Stash, Wave of Hope, and Waves were all noteworthy jams in their own right. But those three, the Melt, the Ruby Waves, and the Gin, are, I think, the jams that are going to be much more heavily listened to. I think there's a lot of potential, especially in the Stash. There are motifs and themes that I would really love to see explored more. I just think, Brian, I think we both agreed on this upon re-listen on Saturday, that it didn't feel as impactful as it did in the moment on re-listen.
Yeah,
Get
I mean, I think
fuck out of here. Sorry.
Do
I
it,
like that
do it.
stash. I think
Do it.
it
I didn't say I
what's
didn't like it.
significant about this stash, first of all, it's good. Second of all, Trey starts heading back to theme
Yeah.
at about 11, 12 minutes or so,
yeah.
and then doesn't go there.
Yeah.
Huge.
What it felt like to
Big
me
move
was
for him not to go there.
What it felt like to me was like Paige and Mike kind of brought it back in, and Trey wasn't done.
Trey, he's on the tonal space to go
Yeah.
to the finish, but then goes away again. And it's exactly what a well-developed post 94 stash ought to be. 94 stashes are entirely tension and running at the very edge of the rails. After that, they just get into deeper spaces and weirder spaces, and then they weren't that good for a long time in 3.0.
Yeah, they were just
And
kind of
then
there.
they learned how to play it again,
Oh.
and now they've learned how to jam it again. This is, we tracked Stash all last year pretty carefully. I did, at least,
And 2021.
this is the one we've been looking for. Is there a bigger one out there? Well, I hope so. But this is the kind of thing that I've been looking for all along. So this is a big deal. Just like the Split Open and Melt is a big deal. But and the fact that they're not even like the top jams of the night really speaks to what a fucking kick-ass show this is. I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 songs in my like jams of Mexico playlist that come from this show.
8. Ooh,
it's hot. Like,
I didn't even mention the Chalk Dust.
You didn't even mention the Chalk Dust.
I know.
And the fact that it then kind of dumps into a kick-ass bathtub gin that is all kinds of like fire hose.
So I'm in full agreement with you guys about this overall show. This show is the amorphous nature of what are you looking for in a Phish show. This show has it, where I cannot predict where it's going to go from song to song. They play a song that my brain may be like, that's not what I've chosen in the moment, but you guys being the band and knowing how to do this, you are more right than I am. I think we all have those moments where a song appears and we're like, not really what I want to hear right now. But then other moments where the song appears and you're like, oh, wow, I did not even think about what this sort of song could add to this show. Really big impact in the moment, especially when you're there, but has great re-listen value because it keeps you on your toes. It keeps you listening. I'm in agreement with you guys as well. Like, I think Wave of Hope, Split Open and Melt, Waves, these are jams that really, it's what happens when jamming is just coming to the band, where they can't really play a song without stumbling into some sort of a jam. And while if they were played in isolation in a different show, it may not have the same amount of impact. It's the same sort of sensation as not comparing this from a quality standpoint, but like 12:30 2018, there's a moment where it's just like, well, every song we play is going to have a long jam on it because we're just in the zone right now. You found that in aspects of the Baker's Dozen as well. And you got that on this night. Like the whole second set flows in a really thematic way to me from a listening standpoint. Ruby Waves, I don't know what this guitar effect is called that Trey is playing with. The only thing that it sounds like to me is what the Edge does during Bullet the Blue Sky, where it sounds like an airliner or sounds like a fighter plane, just like coming down out of the sky, like flames coming off it, crashing in the jungle. Like it is such a bizarre sound. I was thinking about it like, maybe this is the webcast mix, but one of my biggest takeaways from the weekend tied into this is it seems as though when he would go to that effect, it doesn't have the same impact on Mike that his synth pedals do, where his synth pedals are very low end. They sound like a bass lead. And so what does Mike do in that moment? These are more like smears of sound. They're just like walls of sound, walls of
Schmear.
noise. And it seems as though Mike is able to offer new ideas when Trey does that, which then fuels the jam further. I don't know your guys' thoughts
Mhm.
on that.
Yeah, what's interesting about those effects is I think a lot of these new effects that we're hearing is Trey kind of exploring more these M5 stomp boxes that he's been using since the beginning of 2021, which he's been using for some of the synth sounds. And those are like the pedals that can kind of like you can dial up any sort of pedal sound on them. So I think he's been diving into those a little more lately. I will obviously
Mm.
defer to Trey'sGuitarRig.com on this, who
Yeah.
will probably have a breakdown of what the hell was going on soon. But yeah, these sounds were so cool. They started popping up in free on the first night, and they kind of became more prevalent as the weekend went on.
Yeah, that shit was great. I'd also like to shout out on this show the tweeners. So, I list like 8 songs on my jams list, but um after that stash, Heavy Things I felt was well placed. If they're going to play it, that's a pretty good spot to play it. 555
Yeah.
was a good groove. So, some people don't like that song. I don't know why. I love it.
It's because of what
Um
could be. I love the
you mean they could
song,
have
but
played
like
Mike's song there?
no, I mean
Um
like 555 could get jammed out, and it
yes.
like has such a good groove to, but it
It'll
doesn't.
never get jammed out if they don't play it regularly.
Yeah,
There was a nice version at Atlantic City.
Yeah.
You and I were
in
texting about it.
Vegas.
It has that Mike is in a strong space when he writes in like a Little Feat type groove where it feels like it comes out of the bayou.
Speaking of Little Feat, there was no Little Feat.
There's no Little Feat.
In fact, pretty limited covers. I want to say also with the covers, the Levin Cup, it didn't exactly jam, but Trey was definitely leaning
Crushing.
heavy into it. It rips. And you could tell, or at least I could tell during that while watching the webcast, that we were in for something. And I was
Yeah, it had that effect. I remember 12:30 or 10:30 2010, they opened with Cavern. Or no, it was the second song. They opened with Kill Devil Falls and they go into Cavern. And they went into it with such a power that it like almost just knocked the audience back on the webcast. And when you listen back to it, the rest of the show just completely smokes. And sometimes you get that where the first or second song of the show, you're like, they sound a little bit more just like unhinged than they
Mhm.
normally would at this point in time. There's a little more there's something behind them. I agree with you on that Loving Cup. I felt like Trey was kind of taking a victory lap at times through songs like this, like Character Zero, Free, Julius, which we'll get into on the last night. There were moments where it felt like I'm not playing anything that's going to blow your brains away, but it's going to like really, you're going to feel it, and you're going to feel it by the way that I'm playing. And it felt as though they were starting a prelude to a really strong evening. Anything else you guys want to say here about night 2 before we move on to the third night of the run?
I think there's a case to be made for opening sets with closers. So Love and
Yeah.
Cup technically didn't open, but it was, after dinner in a movie, they play Love and Cup, which isn't always a set closer, but honestly
Usually.
should never be. They should always open with that. And First Tube should never be a set closer because the set's over if it's late in the night and they're playing First Tube. But if they open with it, you can just enjoy the full like rippage of the song and know you've got a whole set to come. And they come out of that song feeling good, Trey's jacked, and good things come.
I agree.
Well, and you and I were talking about First Tube feeling almost like an album opener. That it when it comes on, it just like hits you and
It's like,
you want to
like,
just
yeah.
listen no matter what.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, night 3 of Mexico 2023. Set 1, we've got Jabu, No Man, Steam, Poor Heart, Haley's, Into Saw It Again, Theme from the Bottom, Into Maze, About to Run, Most Events Aren't Planned. Set 2, Disease, which was noted as unfinished, Into Golden Age, Into Soul Planet, Into Runaway Jim, Into Light, right into Piper, just a direct segue into Piper, into 2001, into Santos, and the encore was Fee and the Wedge. Thoughts on this overall show, the third night in Mexico? Ryan, how about you?
Definitely a bit of a step down from Friday night, for sure. Obviously, I mean, anything was going to be. Like, there aren't 6 songs over 15 minutes on this night. Obviously, the improvisational centerpiece is the Down with Disease. 25 minutes. Did they tease Dripfield? Who knows, really? Like, who's to say? But lot more solid
People with
playing. That's the
ears
thing.
are to say, but go on.
Yes, it's what I know he didn't actually tease it, but I wish there was a way to note, like, when it's like, it was so close.
Kind of.
Yeah, there's a term for that, actually. Charlie
It's a
Dirksen
CCP.
will inform you that there's a term for that. It's called a jamakintu.
Yes, that's what he did actually
That's
inform
what
me
that,
of.
there you go. It's a jamakintu.
Yeah. But anyway, that was some nice me freaking out briefly during the webcast. But a lot more really solid playing from the band. Like, they may not have improvised for 20 minutes, every single song. There was the one big improvisational centerpiece. But it felt like a little bit of Trady HD this night. Kind of starting with the Haley's Jam, going into Sod again. It really felt like there was some momentum behind the improv there. They were getting into a really nice groove. And then Trey did that thing that I always get worried about when, like, he starts, like, vamping on a chord, and then it, like, kind of like 1% sounds like a different song. And then he's like, oh, that song. And then he plays it.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that.
I felt that.
I felt that it wasn't too bad on this night, although that is definitely a criminal example of that behavior. With the out of the Haleys, because I think the Haleys, it did feel like it had something going. That's in my highlight list because there was a little bit of a jam there. And then, he's like, ooh, we could play this. And then everybody else has to, like, oh, we're going to play that now.
Yeah.
The No Men's, I think, probably also put Trey on the wrong foot. Like, they managed to get something out of it, but he, they played the song. He went to rip into the first big solo. He steps on his pedals, and whatever he's trying to do is not working. And he had to get tech out there to plug in plugs. And I feel like that didn't quite get off the ground, maybe because of that. And as Phil Lesh always says, the best things happen when the gear is not there.
Right.
If you're thinking about your gear, you're not feeling the notes. And I think most musicians who jam will agree with that, probably. Down with Disease is good. It's not a massive moving suite of things. But it's long and entertaining. I think my favorite bits are maybe like the micro jamming in Soul Planet, Add a Light into Piper, which is one of the slowest, quietest intros and phases in Piper in a while. They did one last year somewhere in the summer. I think that was kind of, but not quite as good as this.
And it's 2001.
That was the next thing I was saying. And 2001 had really good weird breaks in it. Like,
what were they doing?
Getting weird. Sign me up. That's my shit. And to the question on the board here, was Poor Heart really 2:38? That seems short. That's not short. Poor Heart is a short little tune. Unless they do slow Poor Heart.
Yes. This was the set where every song was under 10 minutes.
Yeah, that happens.
I'm in full agreement with you guys, and I think it offers like a good just kind of diving in around like things I didn't necessarily love about this overall run. There felt at times towards the back end this night as well as Sunday night that momentum would be there. The band would kind of lean into something and then very quickly move away. And that's a really good point about what Trey was going through during No Men. I went back and rewatched that. I think there's so much that goes through their heads as they're walking on stage and as they're kind of, Trey's always talked about how when he's on stage, he wants to feel like there's nothing else in the world except for that moment, which is part of what leads to ultimate brilliance. And you get ripped out of that, and it's probably hard to jump back into it after a while. Even though I thought Haley's
got there, it just didn't quite. Well, it just didn't do what it did the night before. It's not a bad show, though. Let's be clear.
Well, yeah, and I think it's one of those shows that, like, I was talking with our wonderful co-host Megan. She was at Mexico this year. We were talking about this show in particular because her takeaway walking out of it was one of her favorite Fish shows she went to.
Mm-hmm.
And then she got a little bit of time away from it, went back and listened to it and was like, I don't know if it's as good as I thought it was in the moment.
The old hasty rank.
Well, it's just, there are certain times where you go to a show, and I think this second set is really emblematic of that. Every single song in the second set is awesome.
Yeah.
Every single song. I would hear any of these songs at any Fish show and never be like, why are you playing this?
How weird is it that Runaway Jim seems like the throwaway in that set?
Right. Yeah. There's a 25-minute jam that, while it doesn't necessarily reach the dynamic levels of certain other 25-minute jams, I am of the mindset that I will listen to any Fish 25-minute jam, even if it's just background music. I'll be totally fine with that. The micro jams that you spoke about, Jonathan, Soul Planet had like a 90-second segment of music that I was like, I haven't heard Fish really play like this. It kind of reminds me of the Ruby Waves in some cases, but it sounds very different from 2022 Fish. The Light into Piper was a very seamless segue.
Mm-hmm.
The 2001, I thought it was up there with the Eugene version from fall 2021, where there's an argument that this 2001 was the best connected bit of music played in this second set. It does get me thinking, though.
Nice encore too, by the way.
Very nice encore. Buddy of mine, it was his nice show. It was his 69th show. And he got his first fee. He was very, very happy about that. I want to pose this to you guys because we were talking about this with Friday night, and I think that it's an interesting counterpoint to Saturday. Friday night feels like, both musically, kind of the most risk embracing show of the weekend, but also set list wise. You guys talked about open with a bust out and then go into a show closer or set closer, open second set with a show closer, and the impact that has on the band. This show felt like a very straightforward set list to me.
Mm-hmm.
Other than the Gotta Jaboo opener, which is
that's a rare. Yeah, you're right. That's a
rare.
That's a rare bit.
The second time.
But yeah, there wasn't anything that felt particularly like, whoa, like why are they playing that there? And while that's not like a, that's just something we've gotten used to over the last couple of years with Fish. Like, since the pandemic, like they have turned setlist construction up on their head. And I used to be able to very confidently call openers. Like in 2016, you could pick 3 shows, and AC/DC Bag, Sample in a Jar, and MoMA were going to open 2 of them.
Yeah, but
right?
And you go earlier in 3.0, you'd be like, oh, well, Drowned will open set 2 at
exactly
that show. And here we have a Down with Disease set 2 opener.
Right. And so there are certain things that are still common, but there's also stuff like, Hood opening a show, which in 2011 was never going to happen.
So let me ask you guys this. Brian's been asking a lot of questions. I'm going to ask a question this time. Is this a Saturday night special?
I think so. I think ultimately it reminded me of it has, and I think what you're getting at, it has very specific differentiations from what typically is a Saturday night special, namely a 25-minute jam to anchor set 2 that 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, but it's a second set Down with Disease opener.
Right. This reminded me, my immediate takeaway was a lot of Saturday nights I see at Dick's, where it feels like the band is just hanging out. They had a good day in the mountains. They play a concert, not a ton of consequences around the show. Sometimes that's okay. What are your thoughts?
Brian?
Me? Oh.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. I think, on paper, for sure, looks like a Saturday night special show. Definitely on re-listen, there's a lot more improv than a typical Saturday night special. I think we're going to see a continuation in 2023 of this kind of, this really economical jamming that happens in a lot of different places. I don't think the jamming in the first set and kind of everywhere in the show and weird set list calls, I don't think that's going away anytime soon. The band really seems to be enjoying doing that. They kind of rediscovered, fucking with the common structure of set lists and putting things in weird spots as a way to keep things fresh, So I think that's something that's going to keep happening. And I hope, seeing Disease, like, maybe put a 25-minute Down with Disease in the first set. Like, let's see what happens.
I agree with you. And I think that, it is First of all, the Saturday Night Special only sounds like a derogative term. There's nothing
Right.
wrong with a Saturday night rock show when Fish is playing it and you're there, and when you're sitting at home on your sofa, it's hard to ask for more than what they've given us here. It's pretty good. It's a solid show. It's really fun, and I
Also,
think the thing that they should take away though from this, and by they I mean Fish, when they listen to this, they should take
of
away
course,
that changing the set list structure benefits them and us.
keeps it
Right.
fresh for everybody.
Yeah.
This
it
is
keeps them out of
also
that comfort zone.
the second annual February 25th, 25-minute Down with Disease opener of the second set.
Do it one more year and it's a trend, just like Ghost in the second set of New Year's Eve in early 3.0. I just want to
Sometimes it's a
note,
habit.
Jonathan noted the rare Gotta Jaboo opener. I remembered this when it happened. I did not realize this was the last one. I was at 6/13/2010 in Hershey Park. They opened with Gotta Jaboo. That was the last time that happened.
Is that the
That
double three prize
show,
show?
no, this was the show that had the tweezer that inspired the Double Tweet Prize. A week
Oh,
later
yes,
at
of course.
Hartford. Very, very good show. Beautiful. To Jonathan's point, you look at that show on paper, there's of nothing of consequence that jumps out at you. There's even a drowned second set opener, but it was one of those nights that it's a Sunday night in June in Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania, and it was heaven. It was perfect. Every song was great. You were just there. I don't really go back and listen to it, but it was kind of one of those shows, I think, similar to this show on Saturday night, which is a lot of fun to be at. All right. Final night of the overall Mexico 2023 run. Got a 3:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time start time. It was great. We were outside. We had music blasting out the windows. Kids were riding bikes up and down the streets.
I thought you said you were enjoying winter weather.
No, it was beautiful this week. It was like 60 degrees.
Must
we
be
had
nice.
winter last week.
Must
It
be
snowed
nice.
I know.
Yeah, it's
Denver.
pretty nice down here too.
Yeah, it's amazing everywhere south of the border, Set 1, Sigma Oasis, David Bowie, will it or won't it? Narrator, it did not. Wolfman's Brother,
Did not.
Tube, did not. Prince Caspian, Mole, Ghost, Squirming Coil. Set 2, Possum, Julius, You Enjoy Myself, otherwise known as YEM, otherwise known as Yem, depending on
It's Yem.
how you like to pronounce it. I call it You Enjoy Myself because that's the song name. Everything's Right, Simple, Backwards Down the Number Line, Susie Greenberg, and an encore, a trio, rare song encore, McGrupp, back, baby, McGrupp, Waste, Slave to the Traffic Light. I want to set the tone for this because I've had you guys set the tone for the last 3 nights.
Mm-hmm.
I did not love this show. This show felt like what we were just talking about with Saturday night, where it's a slightly inconsequential show, but it's still a ton of fun. It's still a ton of fun in the moment. It's a ton of fun in aspects of re-listen. I think I will go back and I will listen to the Everything's Right and the Simple from the show, and probably nothing else prior to that or after that. It was fine. It felt unhinged from a set list standpoint. It felt like there were moments in the first set, Wolfman's and Tube, where it hinted at kind of the exploration we heard on Friday night and then was just quickly abandoned. Mole seems to be a song that the band is able to jam, which is shocking because it's also a Mike Gordon song. And we had a couple great versions from the summer. Didn't fully get there. Ghost and Coil felt kind of like a mess to me, to my ears. Possum Julius, these are fun songs. I don't know if these are songs that necessarily cater to the kind of brilliant music that you would want to hear on the 4th night, the final set of a show of a run. But then they kind of come back with You Enjoy Myself, Everything's Right, Simple. Overall, this show I felt like I was tuned in and then tuned out. And I think I'm just going to go back and listen to a couple of songs from it ultimately. But I'm curious, am I totally off base? Do you guys have any thoughts on this that disagree entirely?
I don't know if I disagree entirely, but like largely. I think this show is kind of like Saturday in that it's not bad. Sigma Oasis is a good opener, especially on the beach, of course. Let's have it. And I really want to talk about the David Bowie, but it didn't have a jam.
But talk about
like,
I
want
do
to.
actually. I want to. No, I do have thoughts about it because this is the kind of David Bowie they need to keep playing until the day where they really feel it. Because this is a good David Bowie. It's just not a jammed out David Bowie. So I want more of those. I think this Wolfman's is actually pretty good. It for some reason didn't make my list. I saw some people commenting today after the fact that they thought it had a bit of a Sneak and Sally groove to it, and I think Wolfman's can kind of lay into that. And this is a good example of that. It's still very Type 1, but it's a groovy Wolfman's. I like the call into Caspian at a tube. I liked the Ghost. It's one of those short first set ghosts that we've been getting not
10
irregularly
years.
of late. Yeah, but they do it justice. I know everybody wants the 30-minute swamp funk ghost in the middle of second set while they're losing their minds. But if you can't have that, take this because this is pretty okay.
My highlight of the first set, I think, was Tube. They were doing some really cool stuff in that jam. This was, I think, my only complaint about the sound almost all weekend was during this first set. You couldn't really hear Paige, and Paige was very clearly doing some interesting synthy stuff during this Tube, and Mike was really laying into like the deep octave tones. Just really, really interesting Tube. And Trey's fiddling with his effects too. Like it felt really good. And this Wolfman's was excellent as well. Nice major key space, kind of deviating from the norm, but not, it was still only like 10 or 11 minutes long.
Yeah.
So it wasn't anything crazy.
You mentioned sound problems, and there were two notable issues in the set. Mike's microphone was turned down when he went to sing Mull.
Yep.
And then Paige was singing, but
no, yeah. So
audible?
what happened was, what I think happened at least, is Trey has his button to turn his mic into like the talkback to cue songs for the other band members or whatever, and I guess he did it for Coil, and then he forgot to turn it back to being a regular microphone. So when they started playing Coil, there was no sound coming out of his mic, and so Paige kind of bailed him out before he realized.
It's funny because like the Dead had this setup in 94, 95. They were all in ears, and their mics were talkback mics, but they had to step on a pad to sing. So they like the pad that used to be when you walk into the grocery store, you stepped on the rubber mat to open the door before the thing that like sees you. Nowadays they have the box. You'd step on the pad, the doors would open. They had those little squares they step on to talk back.
I think
Mike,
to
sing.
I think Mike has that. At least he did 10 years ago when he did that rig rundown video. But he did have a pad where his mic doesn't turn on unless he's standing on it. And Trey did have a separate mic for the talkback in 2021.
Right, until now, and that's worth noting too, is that this is the first Phish shows where all four of them are on in-ears.
Yeah.
I think it's also, it's telling like there's a lot of change happening with the technology on stage. And you've got to imagine that, all of that is impacting them and their thought processes. And when it comes up, there's got to be just a rush of, I don't know if like annoyance or like anger, but just, some sort of like frustration that throws you just ever so slightly off, because that sort of stuff is expected to work and flow at a very high quality. And this isn't to call anyone out. It's just like that, I think, impacts where the band is at when that happens.
Well, I mean, some of it could be user error, and, the band's got to achieve comfort and get used to these things as well. So yeah, we don't want to call anybody out because we don't know who we should call out anyways.
Right.
But it's some adjustment, but I think it's to the benefit. I think the band all being on in-ears is going to improve stage sound. It's also going to probably help keep people from going deaf, which is not a bad idea when you're in a
Never a
rock
bad
band.
idea.
And I should point out also, did you guys see Trey's Instagram reels that he did with
Oh my God, yeah.
members of the crew? So he did one with lighting crew. He did one with Paige's piano tech. He was talking about tuning the piano, keeping it in tune in the
I love
humidity.
that one.
And then he had a really interesting one with the guy who works on the monitor side and also does all the interconnects and deals with all the wireless gear on stage. And that was pretty interesting as he talked about the available bandwidth for the wireless equipment and tuning that. And
What's also cool is that
5 to 8 minutes long.
Yeah, what's also cool is that Trey was probably just like bored on Friday and was like, "Ooh, crew members are doing things. I'm gonna go accost them and video them, and put it on social media." Like,
yeah, but I think it's
it's awesome.
it's cool that he's highlighting this stuff because we don't
Right.
we
We don't
sitting
get
out
to see
front
that.
really don't know who most of these guys are.
Yeah, I want to
if
know who
any,
they are.
and what they're doing. We know it's important, and it's cool to share.
Well, and one
why
of
that is.
Trey's greatest moments of clarity during the Coventry weekend was when he was thanking the guys who oversee the sound on stage and who oversee what these guys hear in their monitors. And he made a point multiple times of saying, whatever we've done up on here for the last 20 years is not possible without some of the best sound quality on stage in the entire rock industry.
Mhm.
And so to your point, Jonathan, we don't know a lot of these guys' names. It's not just that Fish is going on stage and plugging in and jamming and just magic
They
happens
don't
and it
plug
just
anything
happens.
in.
Well, they don't plug anything in. But ultimately they're the beneficiaries of some of the highest quality techs in the overall industry. And the more insight that we have to them, the better, because that fulfills the picture of what makes us all special. I do just want to bounce back to one quick note. I just looked this up because I was like, this is really interesting. People were noting that the Wolfmans had a Sneak and Sally vibe to it. And I was like, I know that they've gone Wolfmans into Sally before. It's happened 4 times, all in 1.0. First one was Nassau. The last one, I just want to shout this out because this is a show that nobody talks about. And I highly recommend everyone out there. If this week you're like, fuck, I don't know what to listen to, here's my recommendation. 10/5/2000 from Irvine, California. I didn't listen to this show until I did a 20-year listen to fall 2000 back in the fall of 2020. This show blew me away. It's got a really cool set list, really good jamming in both the first and second set. So I just want to highlight that. I think that it's a great show that doesn't get a lot of attention that people should listen to.
Solid. Can we talk about this Yem? I would like to talk about this Yem.
Let's talk about the Yem.
There's so, obviously Possum Julius You Enjoy Myself is not any way anyone would ever expect a second set to start. Like what, more of that crazy set list variation stuff. But this Yem, aside from, not the cleanest composed section, but also not the sloppiest composed section.
I mean,
Trey,
that's quite a bar.
Come see, come saw.
It's exactly. Solid-ish. But Trey starts his solo, so to speak, or the main jam segment after they're off the trampolines, and he spends a minute or two just like going into the depths of space with this new delay sound that he's been experimenting with, and also some of his synth stuff. And it was a really cool couple of minutes. I thought maybe he was going to take Yem completely off the rails, but he ended up coming back and delivering a very solid Yem peak, as you said earlier, Jonathan. Average great.
Average great. I think. And I think that's how I see this. You Enjoy Myself. That part is cool. I like Trey solo, and I like the whole performance.
That's what makes it the great part.
I like the vocal jam.
Especially it was a long vocal jam.
RJ and Megan were there for the vocal jam,
and they got just obliterated over and over. It wasn't a vocal jam into jam. It was no. We're just going to go back to the
vocal jam.
This
for 5
was
minutes.
This was the second. No, I mean this is now a streak. Sorry, I should say. Of You Enjoy Myself just plopped midway into a set, and I love it every time it happens because there was a trend throughout the early 3.0 period where You Enjoy Myself is such a sacred song. It is only ever played as the final song of a second set of a show that we really like. And if you go through like 09, 10,
the end
11,
of a run, or
yeah, it was like, okay, now it's time for Yem. Let's get ready for the end of the overall run. Let's start reflecting. Now You think about Atlantic City night 3, you think about Deer Creek night 2, you think about Dick's where it was positioned, you think about 1229. It is a song that is utilized with the opportunity for improv to happen. I think that that is a win. That is in line with what we hear out of Stash, to throw back to Friday night, where Stash is thrown out midway through the first set and the band goes, you know what, now we're going to dive off and see what is possible from an improv standpoint here tonight. Now Yem is being used in that way, and we just need David Bowie to be used in that way. That is our only plea, is to
Please.
utilize David Bowie the same
Please,
night.
Fish.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, You Enjoy Myself has been movable lately, and I like that. And again, this is an example of where when they move things around in the set list after that, and I think after the You Enjoy Myself and the extended-ish vocal jam, they felt good, and they go into Everything's Right, and we get, the best jamming of the night after that.
Oh, yeah.
Everything's Right is dope. It's 18 minutes and change and goes into Simple, which is also terrific. This is
sexy Simple.
Yeah, this is a really good segment of the weekend, not just for the show. I think it's a notable segment for the entire weekend. And then just good fun times to close it out, with Numberline and Susie, and a great encore. What more could you ask for?
Mhm.
I will note that the Everything's Right, Ryan, you and I were talking about it last night, reminded me a lot of the August 31st, 2018 Light, where it was very Trey-led, very direct, very soaring. As you noted, Ryan, that I thought was really interesting. That one was, it had a darker edge to it. It was Trey slaying the curveball demons, and he was just playing to the gods at that point. This was more of a sunrise. This was a beautiful, like, they took it down and Everything's Right. It got very melodic, and then it was some of the cleanest playing I felt that we heard from the band the entire weekend. It was gorgeous. It is a jam I'm going to return to often throughout this year, as well as the Simple. We've reached the end of Mexico 2023. Our next time seeing Fish will be just under 2 months. April 14th at Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle. We've got 2 nights in Seattle, 3 nights at the Greek Theater, first time since 2010, and then 3 nights at the Hollywood Bowl in Hollywood, California. Before we go, Jonathan, big takeaway from the weekend? Any big takeaways, any big jams that you're going to be revisiting?
Well, I got a little playlist, so I'll probably get back and dig through most of these. I haven't re-listened to the Everything's Right Simple yet, so I want to get into those. I love the Bathtub Gin, and I'm probably going to spend more time with that, the Stash, and the Melt in particular. I think my biggest takeaway, and this is the thing that our good friend RJ quoted in fish.net review, which is that these guys, they could be done at any time, and I don't mean to be doomsayer.
15 years
It could
ago.
have been done anytime. They could have said, well, COVID's happening, we can't tour, we've done it, we're awesome, victory laps have been lapped, let's chill and release Big Cypress and make some money. But they have things to say.
Like,
they
we're
have
not going to release
sounds
Big Cypress
to make
ever.
Exactly, because they have stuff to share with us, and they're doing it. They did it this weekend, and I assume they'll do it again in the spring.
I really appreciate you noting RJB's review. I want to just read a segment of it that I think summarizes a lot of where the band is at right now, and summarizes a lot of my thoughts on this band. This is from the Friday night show he reviewed. Next Drum is a truly special jam. Waves goes into Ruby Waves. Here's something to think about. The song, a dependable jam vehicle with 10 entries into the jam chart to date, was debuted 36 years into the band's career. How is that even possible? During the jam, I was watching Paige and Trey, particularly based on my view of the stage. Every time one of them made a slight sound adjustment, the other adjusted right alongside. Trey talked about this on our Undermine interview, the importance of listening, telling the band members, hey, I'm here and I'm listening. It's really sweet and inspiring to see these guys listening to each other and still creating new musical directions. He then goes on to say, a late second set, Chalked as Torture, brings us to our headline. We're all yelling, can I live when I'm young? And you can feel it. He, the band, everyone here, that's why we come, at least in part. We're holding on to a part of life that's carefree, silly, not serious, and not consequential. It's pure fun. We travel all the way down here to see music on the beach. We're all just trying to live while we're young, even if we're not that young. And that is a sentiment I got a lot from this weekend. The idea that in certain areas you can hear and feel fish aging. They are 40 years into that career. That anniversary is going to be a huge part of this entire year, but they're still trying to figure out what more is there to say. And if there's anything we could learn as Americans, it's to honor your elders and listen to your elders. And fish, our elder statesmen, have a lot to say. Ryan, before we go, you do a great job running the fish bracket challenge every single year. I'm curious, coming out of this run, what are your top 4 jams of the year?
Yeah, so coming out of this, I've got my top 4 being Ruby Waves, Down with Disease, Everything's Right, Split Open and Melt right now. I'm guessing that's going to shift a little bit over the next week or so as I give them more listens. But coming off of first reactions of the weekend, that's where I'm at. Obviously got lots of time to figure stuff out, but I'm really excited to see where the band goes in the rest of the year. I think, there's a lot of creativity that they're gonna find. We saw a lot of potential this weekend, obviously not just the Friday night show, but in the interplay between band members. Trey and Mike and Trey and Paige had a lot of like back and forth moments and jams and then solos that I'm really looking forward to seeing come to fruition. And as I said earlier, I'm really hoping they come back in April with this well-rehearsed sound, like that they're ready to play. And I hope we see more like that intent to jam that we're looking for over that spring run.
I second that. I've got Ruby, Blazon, Bathtub Gin, and Everything's Right. I'm curious how that's going to adjust. I think that those are the 4 strongest statements, but I think everything that Jonathan listed about his larger highlight reel, it applies. I think everything we talked about here is music to go back and check out. I am excited to see where this band goes as we move to the spring tour. Our first official, I guess you could count last summer as a spring
It wasn't a tour,
This
though.
is a
that
run
was
as well.
End of May.
Yeah,
first
this is
April
a run.
Tour.
This is our first April run of shows that is not just at MSG or in Vegas in God knows how long. Very, very long time. I'm excited for it. Excited to dig into these jams here over the next couple weeks as it continues to thaw and warm here around the contiguous United States of America. Probably a couple snowstorms before.
Yeah, it's not thawing up here yet.
It's not. Jonathan, Ryan, total pleasure as always to talk about fish and music and everything else in between with you guys. Thank you everyone out there for listening to us. We'll be back next week as HFPod 40 for 40 dives into the 1990s. Stick around. We'll see you then. Take care.